What if almost everything you've been taught since childhood about life, God, and the world's suffering was all lies? What if the God you were told to pray to wasn't the true source at all, but an imposter, a false architect, a jailer? In this realm, a beautifully disguised trap designed to keep you asleep. That sense that something's off. You've always felt it, haven't you? If you're anything like me, you've felt that quiet discomfort, like something just doesn't add up. My entire life, I questioned it all. Religion, the system, but I couldn't figure it out. I tried to be good enough, played by the rules, but let's face it, the system is rigged. You look at the suffering, the greed, the endless cycles of pain, and you wonder, if there's a divine creator behind all this, why does it feel so broken? The very Christian thing to say is, well, God has a plan and you just need to be faithful to whatever that is. And so being a Christian for most of my life, I did the best I could at having blind faith. I actually did a pretty good job at keeping the faith. I feel like that is what got me through all those years when I was confused and wondering. But if you're like me, then you are wondering what is really going on here. We're not crazy for thinking this way, and you're definitely not alone. The ancient Gnostics saw this too. They even named it as a deceiver, the Demiurge, the false creator, the false architect. The Demiurge is not the true source of all. It's more like a rogue craftsman, one who mistook itself for God. In Gnostic text, it goes by many names: Yaldabaoth, the blind god, the lion-faced serpent, an arrogant force obsessed with control and power over this material realm. But here's what most don't realize. The Demiurge doesn't rule with chains. It rules with illusion. It survives through your ignorance, your disconnection, your forgetting. The Saturnian prison hidden in plain sight. But this false creator didn't just build the illusion. It disguised itself as God, and then placed itself at the center of every system we've been told is sacred. This is where it gets uncomfortable, but also incredibly freeing, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. The ancient Gnostics described the Demiurge as dense, controlling, obsessed with hierarchy and law. In that sense, it's deeply tied to the energy of Saturn, the ancient god of time, karma, and limitation. In fact, the planet Saturn has been symbolically linked to the Demiurge across mystery traditions for centuries. And here's the part most people don't realize. Saturn is still being worshipped today, not consciously by most people, but through powerful symbols, rituals, and structures that repeat across multiple religions. The cube and the circle, Saturn in plain sight. Let's start with one of the clearest examples. In Islam, during the Hajj pilgrimage, millions of Muslims walk in circles around a black cube known as the Kaaba. Now, most people don't question that. It's tradition, it's sacred, but energetically and esoterically, what's actually happening? The cube is one of the oldest occult symbols for Saturn, the planet of binding, form, and limitation. The black color also corresponds with Saturn, associated with death, seriousness, and the densest frequency. And the act of walking in repetitive circular motion around this cube, it mirrors Saturn's rings, the very cycles the Demiurge uses to bind souls into repetition. I'm not saying every Muslim is worshiping Saturn knowingly. They're not. But the system is designed that way, to channel energy back to the symbol of spiritual confinement. And I would say that they've done a pretty good job at binding souls into false religions. And this theme repeats in other religions too. Christianity and the Saturn overlay. Let's talk about Christianity. Most Christians worship on Sunday now, but originally the Sabbath was on Saturday, and Saturday is named after Saturn. Now, before anyone panics, let me say this. The day itself is not evil, but the way it was framed and enforced under the old system often carried the energy of Saturn, control, law, judgment, and fear-based obedience. We see several times in Scripture where Yeshua, Jesus, confronts the religious leaders on this very issue. In Matthew chapter 12, the Pharisees tried to accuse him for doing work on the Sabbath. But Jesus challenged their heart, saying, "If one of your sheep falls into a ditch on the Sabbath, wouldn't you lift it out? People are worth much more than sheep, so it is right to do good on the Sabbath." He then healed a man's hand right in front of them, and they immediately began plotting to kill him. That shows you the spirit behind it. Not the spirit of love, but the spirit of law, hierarchy, and vengeance. That's Saturn energy. When I began to observe the Sabbath again, not out of guilt, but as a spiritual rhythm, I experienced deeper rest, alignment, and communion with the Most High Father. So I'm not saying we abandon the Sabbath. I'm saying we need to reclaim it from the false frequency it's been wrapped in. Just like the sacred geometry we've discussed in other videos, the children of light are here to reclaim the symbols, the numbers, the frequencies, all of it. Because the Demiurge is a master of inversion. It takes what's holy and overlays it with fear, distortion, and bondage. And one of the most powerful inversions of all is the cross itself. Most people don't realize this, but the Christian cross, the most recognized symbol of the faith, is not just a symbol of salvation. It's a shape with deeper implications. Because when you unfold a cube, a 6-sided box, what do you get? A cross. That's basic geometry. The net of a cube laid flat is a perfect cross. So the cross isn't just a sacred symbol. It's the flattened blueprint of confinement, the 2-dimensional map of a 3-dimensional prison. And the cube? That's Saturn's throne. Saturn, the planetary archetype of time, law, restriction, suffering. The cube has always represented total enclosure, 6 equal faces, 12 rigid edges, 8 sealed corners. It's a container of space, but more than that, it's a container of perception. So when you take that box, Saturn's box, and unfold it into a cross, you're looking at the prison made holy, This is the deception. Redemption presented through suffering, liberation taught through death, divinity externalized into a geometry of control. And right at the center of that geometry, the crucifixion. Jesus, or Yeshua, wasn't placed on a circle or a triangle. He was fixed to the structure of the cube. Now, why does this matter? Because the message we're given is that salvation requires agony, that suffering is sacred, that blood must be spilled for you to be worthy. But the truth is, the cross doesn't liberate the soul, it pins it in place. It tells you the only way out is through death, sacrifice, and submission to a God that demands blood. That's not divine love. That's Saturn's inversion. And here's the deeper truth. Jesus didn't come to glorify the cross. He came to transcend it. He came to expose the illusion of the Demiurge, to show us how to kill the ego, not the body, to awaken the divine spark within, not worship the pain without. But the system, the church, flipped it. They told us to stare at his suffering, to hang it around our necks, to build monuments to the moment of death, instead of embodying the message of resurrection. Because when your focus is on the suffering, you never rise. You stay nailed to the loop, stuck in guilt, unworthy, always needing a savior. But Yeshua didn't die to make you feel guilty. He lived to show you how to break the system from within. And once you see that, once you remember that you are the temple, the light, the living breath of Source, the cross folds back into the cube, and the cube begins to crack. Judaism and the black cube. Now, in Judaism, the Sabbath, Shabbat, is also observed from Friday night to Saturday night. That rhythm itself isn't wrong. In fact, it aligns beautifully with the seventh-day rest of creation, a divine pattern built into time. But over time, layers were added. The tefillin, the black cube worn during prayer, echoes the Saturnian cube. The obsession with rituals, blood sacrifice, and strict laws, that's not the true Father's heart. That's the distortion. So across traditions, we see the same pattern, a holy idea overlaid with control, a divine rhythm hijacked by hierarchy. What we're really doing, when we keep the Sabbath from a place of rest, not ritual, when we honor the seventh day as a space of restoration, not bondage, we're not worshiping Saturn. We're unplugging from the matrix of busyness, productivity, and spiritual striving, and returning to divine order. The true Sabbath frequency is not about Saturn. It's about stillness, presence, and remembering who you are. So yes, the system used Saturday and bent it towards its agenda, but we're not using it that way anymore. Saturn, the force behind the false order. Saturn isn't just a planet. It's a symbol of the Demiurge's system. Time, control, death, contracts, repetition. The exact opposite of what the true Source represents, which is eternal life, flow, and freedom. The enemy doesn't create. It only copies, distorts, and binds. So your job isn't to throw everything away. It's to discern the frequency you're operating in. Even sacred days can become traps if the energy behind them is fear. But when moved by spirit, that same day becomes a portal to freedom. In alchemy, Saturn is linked to lead, the heaviest, slowest, most binding metal. And that's exactly what this realm feels like when you're trapped in it. Heavy, slow, and hard to move through. This is why so many people feel like they're spiritually stuck, because they're worshiping a system that was designed to freeze them in place. As soon as someone decides to follow Jesus, they're encouraged to get into a good church. But churches are not teaching the truth. All of the Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, are all rooted in the false Saturnian system. The God over those religions is not our Father Ahaya, the creator of all. The truth is, you were never meant to worship Saturn. You were meant to overcome it. Worship of the false god. Here's the wild part. This system isn't just running in the background, it's being fed. Not just by our actions, but by our worship. Every altar, every war fought in the name of God, every weekly ritual held under religious banners, all of it pours spiritual energy into the same ancient force, the false God disguised as the true. And here's the trick. Convince humanity they are serving the light, when in reality they're reinforcing the cage. Now, a recent report from ministrywatch.com put this into perspective. It showed that church attendance in America is actually on the rise again. According to a 27-page study by the Exploring the Pandemic Impact on Congregations project, many say their faith is stronger, their churches more vibrant, and their involvement deeper than in years past. Even a Pew Research Center report from earlier this year showed that the decline in Christianity has stabilized after nearly 2 decades of steady drop-off. Charlie Kirk's life and death was a part of this push back into religion. So, what does that mean? People are being pulled back in, not into true spiritual connection, but into religion, into doctrines of men, into systems that look holy, but feed something very old and very deceptive. Now, someone might ask, well, what's the problem with people coming together to love God and one another? And I get it. That sounds beautiful on the surface. But what most people don't understand is the spiritual impact false religion has on the collective consciousness. Our worship is energy, and that energy feeds the system, giving it structure, power, and dominion. And here's what's important to remember. Yeshua, or Jesus, as many call him, never once told us to go into a building and worship the Father in the way we see today. He said, your body is the temple, to worship in spirit and in truth, not through rituals or titles, not through hierarchy. That's why I've been saying this for years, especially in my Come Out of Her, My People video. Christianity, as most people know it today, is not the faith of the early followers. It is the daughter of Catholicism. And Catholicism, as I will show you later in this series, is rooted in Baal worship. So, if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable right now, that's okay. Please just stick with me. Because the truth doesn't demand blind faith. It asks for honest questioning and a willingness to see what's been hidden in plain sight. The operating system of reality. This isn't just about an evil being floating around in another dimension. The Demiurge is a system, an operating framework that runs silently in the background. It's in the stories you were told, the beliefs you were handed, and even in the ego, that inner voice constantly whispering, you are this role, this body, this label, this trauma. It doesn't control with chains, it controls through identification. When you believe you are your pain, your diagnosis, your job title, your image, your failures, you're already caught in its web. Most people don't know this about me, but about 20 years ago, I had an autoimmune disease that almost took me out. I had young kids. I needed to be present, strong, capable, and I could barely function from day to day. I went from doctor to doctor searching for help. But instead of being heard, I was put on antidepressants, dismissed as a drug seeker, handed mind-altering medications that numbed me, but never offered true healing. So I turned to the church. And while I did start to understand that my illness had a spiritual root, it wasn't until I fully stepped out of the church system and started listening to the Holy Spirit as mother that I began to truly heal. It took years of untangling, clearing trauma, not just from this life, but from others, peeling back layers of programming, being deprogrammed from lies I didn't even know I believed. And that's when I realized there is a spiritual lockdown on truth, as long as you're still tethered to those institutions. Yes, you might find some deliverance in churches, but even most ministries are still operating under a religious spirit. True freedom isn't found through a title, a building, or a man-made doctrine. It's found within, by seeking the indwelling spirit of truth. Yeshua said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. And that's not just poetry, that's activation. When your eye is single, when your awareness is centered, your being whole, you become unfragmented. Your body, mind, and spirit align as one. You become light, not in theory, but in reality. Energetic stagnation and the soul loop. So now that we've exposed how the Demiurge works through external systems like religion, let's talk about how it works inside of you, in your energy, your thoughts and patterns. Because this isn't just about churches and rituals, the prison goes deeper than that. It lives in time, in habit, and in what I call energetic stagnation, that place where you're alive but not really living. What is energetic stagnation? It's when your spirit has stopped flowing, your soul is weighed down, and your identity is built from the same recycled emotions, memories, and labels over and over again. You're not evolving, you're replaying. You're not awakening, you're on autopilot. You feel tired, stuck, foggy. You're doing all the things, going to work, keeping up appearances, but somewhere deep inside, you know you're not moving, you're repeating. And this is exactly what the Demiurge wants. Because when your energy becomes stagnant, your soul becomes easier to control. You forget who you are, and you just follow the program. How the system hijacks you. It doesn't need chains when it has repetition. Most people are stuck in the same emotional cycle, the same triggers, the same trauma patterns, the same arguments, the same lessons that keep coming back wearing a different face. And it's not just emotional, it's spiritual. Your energy becomes a feedback loop, like a song stuck on repeat. You're not broken, you're just looping. Welcome to the loop. If you've ever felt like you've been here before, not just in this life, but in others, if you've ever said, I thought I already healed this, why is it showing up again? That's the loop. It's not your imagination, it's the matrix. The Demiurge's system runs on looping energy. And every time you get caught in it, a belief gets reinforced, a wound gets repeated, a soul contract gets renewed, often without your awareness. You're trapped, not in a cage of iron, but in a pattern so old you've forgotten it was even created. The danger of autopilot. Let me ask you something. How many times have you driven somewhere and didn't even remember the drive? How many years have passed and you wonder, where did the time go? That's not just distraction. That's energetic disconnection. The more you live in autopilot, the easier it is for the system to feed on your life force without you even knowing. It runs you on fear, on guilt, on programming from childhood or past lives, all while keeping you tired, too confused, or too distracted to wake up. But there is a way out. You may feel like you're trapped under layers, like there's truth inside of you that you just can't reach. You sense it, but you don't know how to fully embody it. That's because you're carrying old energy that was never cleared. You've been stuck in place, not because you're weak, but because the system was built to hold you there. But once you see the loop, once you recognize the program, you can interrupt it. And that's where we go next. Because you were never meant to stay stuck. You were meant to break the pattern and walk free. The Archons, enforcers of the loop. So, if you've ever wondered, why is it so hard to change even when I'm aware? Why do I feel spiritual resistance every time I try to break through? Why do I feel watched, attacked, or drained when I start waking up? You're not imagining it. That resistance has a name. The Archons. What are Archons? In ancient Gnostic texts, the Archons are described as rulers, authorities, and guardians of the false reality. They are the enforcers of the Demiurge's system, designed to keep you distracted, divided, deceived, and looping. They're not always visible, but they're very real. Sometimes they show up as thought forms, intrusive, critical, shame-filled inner voices. Sometimes they show up as external interference, people, patterns, or even spiritual experiences that seem helpful, but actually reinforce the matrix. And sometimes they move through systems, churches that demand blind obedience, governments that promise safety in exchange for freedom, school systems that reward conformity over creativity, even spiritual circles that pressure you to stay silent when you start seeing the cracks. The Archons aren't all dark. Some wear white robes. This is what trips most people up. Not all Archons come in the form of attack. Some come as false light, They show up with visions, spiritual gifts, even miracles, but they keep you dependent on external power instead of activating your inner connection to Source. The most dangerous prison is the one that looks like a sanctuary. Some of the biggest archonic structures operate behind masks of purity. The charismatic preacher telling you to sow a seed, the online prophet who gives just enough truth to hook you but keeps you stuck in fear, the healing experience that felt beautiful but left you drained, confused, or compromised. These are false light traps designed to give the illusion of progress while pulling your energy right back into the system. How they feed. Archons don't have divine spark. They weren't created by the true source. So they don't create, they feed. What do they feed on? Your attention, your worship, your emotions, especially fear, anger, guilt, and shame, your sexual energy when distorted, your manifestations when they're directed through the wrong channels. Every time you stay in the loop, stuck in guilt, shame, confusion, or survival mode, they're being fed. That's why distraction, division, and drama are always circulating. Because when your energy is scattered, your power is harvestable. Spiritual warfare is real, but not always what you think. Some people think spiritual warfare means just rebuking demons, but warfare at this level looks more like doubting your purpose right before you level up, getting hit with fatigue or anxiety when you try to pray or meditate, relationship triggers pulling you back into old trauma just when you were starting to heal, tech glitches, confusion, and emotional spirals right when you're about to speak the truth. That's not random, that's enforcement. The Archons act like a spiritual immune system for the Matrix. Anytime someone starts waking up, they treat you like a virus trying to escape containment. But the truth is, you are not the virus. You are the cure. And here's the most important part. The Archons don't control you through fear alone. They control you through agreement. As long as you agree with the labels, as long as you keep identifying with the trauma, as long as you believe the inner critic, the shame, the lies, you stay under their jurisdiction. But the moment you remember who you really are, the moment you say no to the loop and yes to the truth, their power breaks. Beauty as the residue of the true source. But if this is all a prison, why is there so much beauty in the world? Sunsets, music, love, the awe of being alive. The Gnostics said that beauty is not the Demiurge's creation. It's the residue of the true source, the divine spark buried within matter, still glowing in you, still calling you home. Here's the part most people miss. The cage isn't made of metal, it's made of perception. The Demiurge flips everything upside down. It paints the false as sacred and the sacred as dangerous. It teaches you to fear the path that would set you free. But when you turn inward, when you rest in awareness, you find the one thing it cannot touch: your direct connection to the living source. Breaking the spell. So how do you escape a trap this deep? Not by fighting the system. That's still its game. You break free by stepping outside its rules, by remembering who you are before the programming, by noticing when fear, shame, competition, even spiritual superiority try to run your life. The ego is the Demiurge in miniature. And the moment you stop obeying it, the system starts to crack. Karma versus Dharma. The rulers of this realm are called Lords of Karma, but karma here isn't divine justice. It's programming, a cause and effect loop that keeps you repeating the same patterns. When you step into Dharma, which means acting from presence, purpose, and source, when you align with source energy, you unplug from the matrix. The Archons don't have a script for someone living from true now moment sovereignty. When you are fully aligned with source, the Archons can't touch you. So now that you understand the architecture of this false creation, the Demiurge, Saturn, the Archons, the ego, the real question becomes, what do you do next? How do you actually walk the path out of the prison? That's exactly what I'm going to show you. I've developed a system over many years of walking this aliyah myself that will help you to break karmic cycles, reconnect with the true source, and dismantle the ego structures that feed the false god from within. And in your doing the inner work, it will free your bloodline from the same karmic loop. It ends with our generation. So hit the like button and subscribe for more truth. Until next time, be blessed. Namaste.